There's a weight you've been carrying that was never yours to hold. It doesn't belong to you. It didn't come from you. But somehow, you picked it up. Maybe someone handed it to you, and you accepted it without thinking. Maybe you saw it lying there and assumed it was your responsibility. Maybe you've carried it for so long, you've forgotten it's not yours. But it's there, heavy, constant, exhausting, and it's destroying you. This weight has a name. It's called other people's emotions, other people's problems, other people's expectations, other people's pain, and you've been carrying all of it as if it were your burden to bear, as if their happiness is your responsibility, as if their disappointment is your failure, as if their struggle is your emergency. But it's not. It never was. Most people live their entire lives as emotional pack mules. They carry their own struggles, which is appropriate. But they also carry their mother's disappointment, their father's unfulfilled dreams, their partner's insecurities, their children's fears, their friends' crises, their colleagues' stress. They absorb every emotion in every room. They take responsibility for every mood. They fix every problem that isn't theirs to fix. And they call it love. They call it caring. They call it being a good person. But it's not. It's codependency. It's enmeshment. It's self-abandonment disguised as compassion. And it's killing them slowly. One carried burden at a time. You can feel it in your body. That heaviness in your chest. That tension in your shoulders. That exhaustion that sleep doesn't fix. That's not just your stress. That's the accumulated weight of everything you've taken on that doesn't belong to you. Every time you worried about someone else's problem more than they did. Every time you felt guilty for someone else's disappointment. Every time you tried to fix someone who didn't ask to be fixed. Every time you made someone else's emotional state your responsibility. You added weight. And now you're crushed under it. Unable to move forward. Unable to breathe. Unable to live your own life because you're too busy managing everyone else's. But here's the truth that will set you free. You are not responsible for other people's emotions. You are not responsible for their happiness. You are not responsible for their healing. You are not responsible for their choices or their consequences. You are responsible for your own behavior, your own integrity, your own energy. That's it. Everything else? Not yours. And the moment you truly understand that, the moment you put down what isn't yours to carry, your entire life changes. Not because people change, but because you stop letting their weight crush you. You stop making their internal world your problem to solve. You stop sacrificing yourself on the altar of their comfort. This audiobook is about learning to distinguish between what's yours and what's theirs. About understanding the difference between empathy and absorption, between helping and enabling, between compassion and codependency. You'll learn why you picked up these burdens in the first place, why you've been trained to carry what isn't yours, why letting go feels like abandonment when it's actually liberation. You'll discover how to care deeply without carrying endlessly, how to support without sacrificing, how to love without losing yourself, how to set boundaries without guilt, and how to finally put down the weight that was never yours to hold. By the end of this audiobook, you'll know how to walk into a room and not absorb everyone's energy, how to hear someone's problem without making it yours, how to support someone without fixing them, how to say no without guilt, how to prioritize your peace without feeling selfish. you'll understand that letting go of what isn't yours doesn't make you cold. It makes you clear. It makes you healthy. It makes you capable of actually helping instead of just drowning alongside everyone else. Because you can't pour from an empty cup, and you've been pouring from empty for far too long. So take a breath. Feel the weight you're carrying right now. All the worries that aren't yours. All the problems you're trying to solve that you didn't create. All the emotions you're managing that you didn't generate. Feel how heavy it all is. And know this. You're allowed to put it down. You're allowed to stop carrying what was never meant for you. You're allowed to care without carrying. You're allowed to love without losing yourself. You're allowed to be free. Let's begin. Not by picking up more, but by learning, finally, to put down what doesn't belong to you. Chapter 1. How you became a carrier. You weren't born carrying other people's burdens. As a child, you were naturally boundaried. You cried when you were hurt. You laughed when you were happy. You asked for what you needed. You didn't worry about managing other people's feelings. You didn't feel responsible for their moods. You were just you, free, unburdened, whole. But somewhere along the way, that changed. You learned to carry. You learned that other people's emotions were your responsibility, that their comfort mattered more than yours, that being good meant making sure everyone else was okay, even if it meant sacrificing yourself. And once you learned that lesson, you never unlearned it. You just kept carrying, and carrying, and carrying, until you forgot what it felt like to be light. So how did this happen? How did you become someone who carries what isn't theirs? It started in childhood. For most people, it started with their parents. Not because parents are villains, but because many parents, unintentionally, made their children responsible for their emotional well-being. Maybe your parent was depressed and you learned to be cheerful to lift their mood. Maybe your parent was anxious and you learned to be perfect to ease their worry. Maybe your parent was angry and you learned to be invisible to avoid triggering them. Maybe your parent was emotionally absent and you learned to be whatever they needed to get their attention. In all of these scenarios, you learn the same lesson. Your job is to manage their emotions. Your worth is determined by how well you keep them happy. Your safety depends on keeping the peace. This is called emotional parentification. It's when a child takes on the emotional responsibility of caring for their parent. And it's incredibly damaging. Because children aren't supposed to manage adult emotions. They're supposed to be children, to play, to grow, to be cared for, not to be the caretaker. But when you're put in that role, when your parent's emotional state becomes your responsibility, you learn to prioritize their needs over your own. You learn to read moods, to adjust your behavior based on their emotions, to feel guilty when they're upset, even if you did nothing wrong. And that pattern, it follows you into adulthood. You become an adult who still feels responsible for everyone's emotions, who can't relax unless everyone around you is okay, who sacrifices your own needs to meet everyone else's. Let me tell you about a woman named Camilla. Camilla grew up with a mother who was chronically unhappy. Her mother never said it explicitly, but the message was clear. Camilla's job was to make her happy. So Camilla tried. She was the perfect daughter. Good grades, good behavior, always helpful, always cheerful. She learned to read her mother's moods and adjust accordingly. If her mother was sad, Camilla would try to cheer her up. If her mother was stressed, Camilla would be quiet and undemanding. Camilla's entire childhood was spent managing her mother's emotions, and she thought that's what love was. Sacrifice, vigilance, constant adjustment. As an adult, Camilla carried that pattern into every relationship. She dated men who were emotionally unavailable, and she made it her mission to make them happy. She had friends who constantly needed support, and she gave endlessly, even when she had nothing left. She worked in jobs where she absorbed everyone's stress, trying to fix every problem, and she was exhausted, burnt out, resentful. But she didn't know how to stop, because stopping felt like failing, like abandoning, like being selfish. She'd been trained her entire life to carry others' emotions, and unlearning that felt impossible. But it's not impossible. It's just unfamiliar. Because carrying isn't innate. It's learned. And what's learned can be unlearned. The first step is recognizing where the pattern came from. Understanding that you were taught to carry. That it's not your nature. It's your conditioning. And that conditioning, while it served a purpose in childhood, is now harming you. Because you're not a child anymore. You're not responsible for your parents' happiness. You're not responsible for anyone's happiness except your own. And even that isn't about constant positivity. It's about honoring your needs, setting boundaries, and living in alignment with your truth. You also learn to carry through modeling. If you grew up watching a parent sacrifice themselves for everyone else, you learned that's what good people do. If you saw your mother ignore her own needs to meet everyone else's, you learned that self-sacrifice equals love. If you watched your father carry the weight of the family without complaint, you learned that suffering in silence is strength. You internalized the message that your needs don't matter, that other people's comfort comes first, that being a good person means being selfless. But selflessness, when taken to the extreme, becomes self-abandonment. And self-abandonment is not noble. It's destructive. Another reason you became a carrier is because it gave you value. As a child, if you felt unseen or unloved, carrying others' burdens might have been the only way to feel needed. If you could fix your sibling's problem or ease your parents' stress, suddenly you mattered. You had a role, a purpose, and that felt better than being invisible. So you kept doing it. You kept being the helper, the fixer, the one everyone could rely on. And it felt good. Until it didn't. Until the weight became too much. Until you realized that being needed isn't the same as being loved. That people depending on you isn't the same as people valuing you. That you'd built your entire identity around being useful, and now you didn't know who you were without that role. Society also reinforces this, especially for women. Women are taught from a young age to be nurturers, to prioritize others, to be selfless, to put everyone's needs before their own. And if they don't, they're called selfish, cold, uncaring. So women carry. They carry their families, their communities, their workplaces, and they do it with a smile, because that's what's expected. But men carry too, in different ways. Men are taught to be providers, to be strong, to handle everything without showing weakness, to carry financial burdens, emotional burdens, the weight of expectations, and they do it silently. Because that's what's expected, so everyone is carrying, and everyone is exhausted. But no one questions whether the carrying is necessary. They just keep doing it, because it's what they've always done. But here's the truth. You don't have to keep carrying just because you always have. You don't have to sacrifice yourself just because it's what you were taught. You don't have to be responsible for everyone just because they expect it. You can choose differently. You can decide that your energy is valuable, that your peace matters, that your life is yours to live, not theirs to burden. That's not selfish. That's self-preservation. And self-preservation is the foundation of a healthy life. Because if you don't preserve yourself, there won't be anything left. You'll burn out, break down, disappear into the role of caretaker until there's no you left. Just a shell, going through the motions, resenting everyone you're helping. That's not love. That's martyrdom. And martyrdom doesn't serve anyone. Let's continue. Chapter 2. The difference between empathy and absorption. There's a word people use a lot: empathy. The ability to understand and share someone else's feelings. It's considered a virtue, a strength, a quality of good people. And it is. Empathy is beautiful. It's what allows us to connect, to support, to care. But there's a shadow side to empathy that no one talks about. It's called absorption. And absorption is not empathy. It's the complete loss of boundaries between yourself and another person's emotional state. It's feeling their feelings as if they're yours, taking on their pain as if it's your responsibility, carrying their emotions as if they're your burden. And while empathy connects you to others, absorption destroys you. Here's the difference. Empathy says, I see that you're hurting, and I care. Absorption says, you're hurting, so now I'm hurting, and I have to fix it, or I can't be okay. Empathy allows you to understand someone's pain while maintaining your own emotional stability. Absorption means their pain becomes your pain, and you lose yourself in it. Empathy is standing on the shore, reaching out to help someone in the water. Absorption is jumping in the water with them and drowning together. One is helpful. The other is destructive. And most people who consider themselves empathetic are actually absorbers. They don't just feel with people. They feel for people. And that distinction matters. Let me give you a scenario. Your friend calls you. They're upset. Something happened at work. They were treated unfairly. They're angry, hurt, frustrated. If you're empathetic, you listen. You validate their feelings. You say, that sounds really hard. I'm sorry that happened. You offer support, maybe advice if they ask for it. But when the call ends, you move on with your day. You felt compassion for them, but their problem didn't become yours. You didn't take their anger into your body. You didn't spend the rest of the day upset on their behalf. You cared, but you didn't carry. But if you're an absorber, that call affects you differently. You listen, and as they talk, you start feeling their anger, their frustration, their hurt. You take it on as if it happened to you. And when the call ends, you can't let it go. You're upset. You're ruminating about their situation. You're angry at their boss, even though you've never met them. You're thinking about solutions, planning what they should do, losing sleep over their problem. And the next day, when your friend has moved on, you're still carrying it, still heavy with their emotion, and they don't even know, because they just needed to vent. They weren't asking you to carry it, but you did anyway, because you don't know how not to. Absorption happens because of weak boundaries. You don't know where you end and others begin. Their emotions bleed into your space, and you can't separate. You feel responsible for their feelings. Like if they're upset, you failed them somehow. Like their pain is yours to fix. But it's not. Their pain is theirs to process. Their emotions are theirs to manage. Your role, if they've asked for support, is to be present. Not to absorb, not to fix, just to be there. But most absorbers can't do that. They can't sit with someone's pain without trying to take it away. Because sitting with pain is uncomfortable. And absorbing feels like doing something. Even though it's not helping, it's just making two people suffer instead of one. Let me tell you about a man named Julian. Julian was a therapist. He chose the profession because he genuinely cared about people. He wanted to help, and he was good at it. His clients trusted him, opened up to him, shared their deepest pain. But Julian had a problem. He absorbed everything. Every client's trauma became his trauma. Every client's grief became his grief. He'd sit in sessions, and by the end, he'd be emotionally exhausted. Not just tired from listening, depleted, like he'd taken on their suffering, and he had. He couldn't help it. He felt responsible for their healing. Like if they didn't get better, he'd failed. So he carried their pain, took it home with him, thought about them at night, worried about them on weekends, and it destroyed him. Within 2 years, Julian burned out. He developed secondary traumatic stress. He couldn't sleep, couldn't stop thinking about his clients, couldn't separate their suffering from his own. He had to take a leave of absence. And in that time, he learned something crucial. Empathy requires boundaries. You can care deeply without caring deeply. You can be present without absorbing. You can support without sacrificing yourself. But it requires a clear distinction between your emotions and theirs, between your responsibility and theirs. Julian had to learn that his job wasn't to take away their pain. His job was to hold space for it, to witness it, to guide them through it, but not to carry it for them. That was their work, not his. The same is true for you. Whether you're a therapist or a friend or a family member, you can care without carrying. You can be compassionate without being consumed. But you have to learn the skill of boundaries, of emotional separation, of recognizing when you're absorbing instead of empathizing. Here's how you tell the difference. After an interaction with someone who's struggling, check in with yourself. Are you still feeling their emotion? Are you still thinking about their problem? Are you feeling responsible for fixing it? If yes, you've absorbed. If no, if you felt compassion in the moment, but returned to your own emotional state after you empathized, that's the goal. Feel with them in the moment. Then return to yourself. Here's a practice. When someone shares their pain with you, imagine a clear boundary between you and them. Visualize it as a window. You can see them clearly. You can hear them. You can even reach through to touch them, to offer comfort. But you're not in their space. You're in yours. Their emotions are on their side of the window. Yours are on your side. You can acknowledge their pain without taking it in. You can say, "I see how hard this is for you," without feeling it as if it's happening to you. That window is your boundary. And boundaries aren't walls that block connection. They're structures that allow healthy connection without enmeshment. Absorption also happens because of guilt. You feel guilty for being okay when someone else isn't. You feel guilty for having what they don't. You feel guilty for not suffering as much as they are. So you absorb their pain to balance the scales, to prove you care, to show you're not indifferent. But suffering with someone doesn't help them. It doesn't lighten their load. It just adds your suffering to the world. And now 2 people are in pain instead of 1. That's not compassion. That's codependent guilt, and it serves no one. True compassion is being grounded in your own peace so you can offer stable support. It's not drowning with them. It's throwing them a rope from solid ground. But to do that, you have to stay on solid ground. You have to maintain your emotional stability. You have to care without absorbing, feel without carrying, support without sacrificing. That's the balance. And it's not easy. It takes practice. It takes constant vigilance. It takes choosing yourself, even when it feels selfish. But it's necessary, because absorption helps no one. It just creates two casualties instead of one. And the world doesn't need more casualties. It needs more people who can stay grounded while others are falling apart, who can hold space without holding pain, who can care without carrying. That's real strength. That's real empathy. Let's move forward. Chapter 3. The guilt that keeps you trapped. If carrying other people's burdens is so exhausting, why don't you just stop? Why don't you put it down and walk away? The answer is simple. Guilt. The most powerful chain that keeps you trapped. The voice that whispers, if you stop helping, you're a bad person. If you stop carrying, you're selfish. If you stop sacrificing, you're abandoning them. Guilt is the invisible fence that keeps you imprisoned in the role of caretaker, fixer, emotional pack mule. And until you dismantle that guilt, until you recognize it for the manipulation it is, you'll never be free. You'll keep carrying, keep sacrificing, keep drowning. All because you're afraid of feeling guilty for choosing yourself. Here's the truth about guilt. It's a learned response. You weren't born feeling guilty for prioritizing your needs. You learned to feel that way. Someone, somewhere, taught you that your needs matter less than others, that taking care of yourself is selfish, that saying no is mean, that boundaries are unkind. And you internalize that message so deeply that now guilt arises automatically anytime you even consider putting yourself first. It's not intuition. It's not your conscience. It's conditioning. And conditioning can be questioned. Think about the last time you said no to someone. Maybe they asked for a favor you didn't have energy for. Maybe they wanted your time when you needed rest. Maybe they needed something you simply couldn't give. And you said no. What happened next? You probably felt guilty. Even if your no was completely reasonable. Even if you had every right to decline. You felt bad. Like you'd failed them. Like you were being selfish. And that guilt might have been so uncomfortable that you changed your mind. You said yes, even though you meant no. You gave, even though you had nothing left. Because guilt is unbearable for people pleasers. It feels like proof that you're bad, and you'll do anything to make it go away, even sacrifice yourself. But here's what you need to understand. Guilt, in this context, is not a sign that you've done something wrong. It's a sign that you've done something different. Something that goes against your conditioning. Something that prioritizes you instead of them. And that feels wrong because it's unfamiliar. But unfamiliar doesn't mean incorrect. In fact, the guilt you feel when you set a boundary is often a sign that you're doing exactly what you need to do. You're breaking an unhealthy pattern. You're honoring yourself. You're choosing freedom over approval. And your conditioning, threatened by this change, is producing guilt to pull you back in line. Let me tell you about a woman named Naomi. Naomi had a sister, Beth, who was constantly in crisis. Financial problems, relationship drama, job issues. And every time, Beth called Naomi. And every time Naomi helped, she lent money. She gave advice. She spent hours on the phone listening. She rearranged her schedule to support Beth. For years, this went on, and Naomi was exhausted. She loved her sister, but she was tired of being the emergency contact for Beth's life, tired of sacrificing her own peace for Beth's chaos. So one day, when Beth called with another crisis, Naomi said something she'd never said before. "I can't help you with this. I'm sorry, but I need to focus on my own life right now." The silence on the other end was deafening. Then Beth said, "I can't believe you're abandoning me when I need you most," and hung up. Naomi felt crushing guilt. Maybe she was abandoning her. Maybe she was being selfish. Maybe she should have just helped one more time. The guilt was so intense that she almost called back to apologize, but she didn't. She sat with the discomfort. She reminded herself that Beth was an adult, that Beth's problems were Beth's to solve, that Naomi had given years of support, and it was okay to stop. And slowly, the guilt faded, not completely, but enough that she could breathe, enough that she could see clearly. Beth wasn't in actual danger. She was just upset that Naomi wasn't playing her usual role, and that wasn't Naomi's problem to fix. Guilt also comes from misunderstanding what love means. Many people believe that love requires sacrifice, that if you're not suffering for someone, you don't really care. That love means putting their needs above yours, always. But that's not love. That's martyrdom. Real love is mutual. It honors both people. It doesn't require one person to disappear so the other can thrive. Real love includes boundaries, includes self-care, includes the understanding that you can't pour from an empty cup, that helping someone doesn't mean destroying yourself, that support doesn't require sacrifice. Here's a powerful reframe. Saying no to someone is not rejecting them. It's respecting your limits. It's honoring your capacity. It's being honest about what you can and cannot give. And honesty, even when it disappoints, is kinder than false promises. It's kinder than saying yes and then resenting them. It's kinder than giving from empty and then burning out. People might not like your no. They might be disappointed. They might even be angry. But their feelings are not evidence that you've done something wrong. Their feelings are their response to not getting what they wanted. And that's not your responsibility to manage. Guilt also keeps you trapped because it prevents you from seeing manipulation. Some people use guilt deliberately. They know you're someone who can't stand to disappoint, so they leverage that. They make you feel responsible for their feelings. They frame their needs as emergencies. They punish you with silence or anger when you don't comply. And you, desperate to avoid guilt, comply. You give in, you sacrifice, you carry. Because that feels better than feeling like a bad person. But that dynamic is manipulation. And participating in it doesn't make you loving. It makes you complicit in your own exhaustion. Here's how to start dismantling guilt. When guilt arises, pause. Ask yourself, did I actually do something wrong? Or did I just do something different? Did you harm someone? Or did you just set a boundary? Did you betray someone? Or did you just prioritize yourself? Most of the time, you'll realize you didn't do anything wrong. You just did something that goes against your conditioning. And that's not a reason to feel guilty. That's a reason to feel proud. Because you're choosing yourself. You're breaking free. You're reclaiming your life from the role of perpetual caretaker. Another question to ask: whose voice is this guilt? Is it yours, or is it echoes of someone else? Often, the guilt we feel is actually internalized criticism. Your parents' voice saying you're selfish. Your partner's voice saying you're not doing enough. Society's voice saying you should sacrifice more. But it's not your voice. It's theirs. And you don't have to obey voices that aren't yours. You get to decide what's right for you. You get to choose your priorities. You get to honor your limits. And if that makes someone else uncomfortable, that's information about them, not evidence against you. Guilt is the prison. Freedom is on the other side of it. But to reach freedom, you have to walk through the guilt. You have to feel it and choose yourself anyway. You have to set the boundary, even though guilt screams at you not to. You have to say no, even though guilt tells you you're bad. And every time you do, guilt loses a little power, because you prove to yourself that you can survive it, that choosing yourself doesn't destroy you or others, that boundaries don't mean you don't care. They mean you care about yourself too. And that's not selfish. That's necessary. Let's continue. Chapter 4. Why you can't save everyone. There's a fantasy many carriers hold. It's the belief that if they just try hard enough, love deeply enough, sacrifice completely enough, they can save everyone. They can fix their broken family member, heal their wounded friend, transform their struggling partner, make everyone okay, and then finally they can rest. Finally, they can be at peace. But this fantasy is a lie, a beautiful, seductive, devastating lie, because you can't save everyone. You can't even save most people. In fact, you can't save anyone who doesn't want to save themselves. And trying to do so doesn't make you noble. It makes you exhausted, resentful, and ultimately ineffective. Here's a hard truth. People change when they're ready. Not when you're ready for them to change. Not when you've suffered enough on their behalf. Not when you've given everything you have. When they're ready. And no amount of your effort can force that readiness. You can offer support. You can provide resources. You can hold space. But you cannot do the work for them. You cannot want their healing more than they do. You cannot carry them to transformation. They have to walk that path themselves. And if they're not willing, all your carrying accomplishes is your own depletion. Think about someone you've tried to save. Maybe it's a family member who keeps making the same destructive choices. You've given advice, lent money, created opportunities, and yet they keep falling back into the same patterns. Maybe it's a friend who constantly complains but never takes action. You've listened for hours, offered solutions, been endlessly supportive, and yet nothing changes. Maybe it's a partner who refuses to work on themselves. You've been patient, accommodating, hopeful, and yet the issues remain. In all these cases, you're trying to save someone who isn't asking to be saved. Or worse, someone who actively resists being saved. And your efforts, no matter how well-intentioned, are futile. Let me tell you about a man named Mateo. Mateo had a brother, Santiago, who struggled with addiction. For years, Mateo tried to help. He paid for rehab multiple times. He let Santiago live with him. He got him jobs. He covered his debts. He did everything he could think of to save his brother. And every time, Santiago would relapse. The pattern repeated endlessly. Mateo would help. Santiago would get better temporarily. Then Santiago would fall again. And Mateo would jump back in, trying harder, giving more, convinced that this time would be different. This time, his love would be enough. This time, Santiago would change. But Santiago didn't change. Not because Mateo didn't love him enough, Not because Mateo didn't try hard enough, but because Santiago wasn't ready. He wasn't willing to do the internal work required for real transformation. He wanted relief from consequences, not change. And Mateo's constant rescuing actually enabled Santiago to avoid facing those consequences. Every time Mateo stepped in, he softened the impact of Santiago's choices. And without feeling the full weight of his actions, Santiago had no reason to change. Mateo thought he was saving his brother, but he was actually preventing his brother from hitting the rock bottom that might motivate real change. Eventually, Mateo's therapist told him something that changed everything. You can't want his sobriety more than he does, and right now, you do. That hit Mateo hard, because it was true. He was more invested in Santiago's recovery than Santiago was. He was carrying the weight of Santiago's addiction, while Santiago just went along for the ride. And Mateo realized that if he kept rescuing, Santiago would never have to save himself. So Mateo made one of the hardest decisions of his life. He stopped helping. He told Santiago he loved him, but he couldn't continue to enable him, that Santiago needed to choose recovery for himself. And then Mateo stepped back. It was excruciating. Mateo watched his brother spiral, watched him lose everything, and every instinct screamed at Mateo to intervene, but he didn't. He held his boundary, and eventually, Santiago did hit rock bottom. And that rock bottom, painful as it was, became the catalyst for real change. Santiago entered rehab, actually committed this time, and started building a recovery that was his, not Mateo's. Years later, Santiago thanked Mateo, not for all the times he'd helped, but for the time he'd stopped, because that's when Santiago finally had to save himself. And that's when real healing began. You can't save everyone because everyone is on their own journey. Their timeline is not yours to dictate. Their lessons are not yours to prevent. Their growth is not yours to force. Your job, if you love them, is to support their journey, not control it. To cheer them on, not carry them. To believe in them, not do it for them. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is step back. Let them struggle. Let them fail. Let them face the consequences of their choices, because struggle is where growth happens. Failure is where wisdom is earned. Consequences are where accountability is learned. And if you keep preventing all of that, you're not helping them. You're infantilizing them. Here's another truth. Some people don't want to be saved. They're comfortable in their dysfunction. It's familiar. It's what they know. And changing would require discomfort they're not willing to face. So they stay stuck. And they want you to stay stuck with them. They want you to keep rescuing, keep enabling, keep making their life manageable without them having to change. And if you're a natural helper, you'll do it. You'll keep giving, hoping that eventually your love will be the thing that transforms them. But it won't. Because transformation comes from within, not from without. You can't love someone into change. You can only love them while they choose whether or not to change. So what do? You stop trying to save them. You offer support if they ask for it, if they're actively working on themselves, if they're taking responsibility. But you don't rescue. You don't enable. You don't carry. You let them own their choices and the outcomes of those choices, and you focus your energy on your own life, on your own healing, on your own growth, because that's the only life you have any real control over. You can't save everyone, but you can save yourself from exhaustion, from resentment, from the illusion that your worth depends on fixing everyone around you. That's the work, not saving them. saving yourself from the compulsion to try. Let's move forward. Chapter 5. The people who will never appreciate your sacrifice. There's something you need to hear, even though it will hurt. Some people will take everything you give and never say thank you. They will drain you dry and then complain you didn't give enough. They will accept your sacrifices as their entitlement and your exhaustion as your problem. You will bend over backwards for them, and they will criticize the angle. You will give until you have nothing left, and they will ask why you stopped. These people exist, and if you're a natural giver, a chronic carrier, a habitual helper, you've encountered them. Maybe you're still entangled with them, still giving, still hoping that one day they'll see your effort. One day they'll appreciate your sacrifice. One day they'll say, "Thank you, you've done enough." But that day will never come. Because people who take you for granted don't suddenly develop gratitude. They just develop higher expectations. The painful truth is this: not everyone deserves your energy. Not everyone has earned access to your time, your resources, your emotional labor. But you give it anyway. You give to people who don't value it, who don't reciprocate, who don't even acknowledge it. And you do it for one of two reasons. Either you believe that if you just give enough, they'll finally see your worth, or you believe that your worth is determined by how much you give. Both beliefs are false. Both beliefs will destroy you, because worth is inherent. It's not earned through sacrifice. It's not proven through depletion. It simply is. And people who require you to prove your worth through endless giving are not people who will ever validate you. They're people who will exploit you. Let me tell you about a woman named Lucia. Lucia had a friend, Monica, who always needed something: money, advice, a place to stay, emotional support. And Lucia always provided it, for years. She rearranged her life to accommodate Monica's crises. She lent money she couldn't afford to lend. She spent hours listening to problems that never changed. And Lucia told herself this was friendship. This was loyalty. This was love. But it wasn't. It was a one-way relationship where Lucia gave everything and Monica took everything. And the worst part? Monica never appreciated it. She never thanked Lucia. She treated Lucia's help as if it were owed, as if Lucia were a service rather than a person. One day, Lucia needed help. She was going through something difficult and reached out to Monica. And Monica wasn't available. Too busy. Too stressed. Too much going on in her own life. No reciprocation. No support. Just excuses. And in that moment, Lucia saw the relationship clearly. It had never been mutual. Monica took. Lucia gave. That was the dynamic. And it would never change because Monica had no incentive to change. Lucia had trained her to expect endless support without reciprocity. And Monica had accepted that arrangement happily. So Lucia made a decision. She stopped giving. She set boundaries. She pulled back. And Monica was furious. She accused Lucia of being selfish, of abandoning her, of changing. And Lucia realized something. Monica didn't value her. Monica valued what she could get from her. And the moment Lucia stopped providing it, Monica discarded her. That's the hard truth about unappreciative people. They don't love you. They love what you do for them. And the moment you stop doing it, they reveal who they really are. Not friends, not family, just users. People who saw your kindness as weakness, your generosity as obligation, your sacrifice as their right, and realizing this is painful because it means all that giving, all that sacrifice, all those years of effort, we're not building a relationship. They were feeding an imbalance. You were investing in someone who would never invest back. And accepting that feels like failure, like wasted time, like proof that you weren't enough. But it's not. It's proof that they were never worthy of what you gave. Here's how you recognize these people. They only reach out when they need something. They're absent when you're struggling, but present when they're struggling. They take your help for granted. They don't thank you. They don't reciprocate. They don't consider your needs. They don't ask how you're doing. They just take and take and take. And when you finally stop giving, they either get angry or they disappear. Because they were never there for you. They were there for what you provided. And without that, you have no value to them. The question is, why do you keep giving to people like this? Why do you tolerate one-sided relationships? Usually, it's because you're hoping they'll change. You're hoping that if you just give a little more, prove your loyalty a little more, sacrifice a little more, they'll finally see you, finally value you, finally reciprocate. But hope is not a strategy. And giving more to someone who doesn't appreciate it doesn't teach them appreciation. It teaches them they can take from you indefinitely, that you have no limits, that your needs don't matter. And they'll keep taking until you stop them, because people treat you how you allow them to treat you. And if you allow being taken for granted, you'll be taken for granted. Here's a practice. Audit your relationships. Make a list of the people in your life. Next to each name, write 2 things: what you give to this relationship and what you receive from this relationship. Be honest. Include time, energy, emotional support, financial help, everything. Then look at the balance. Is it mutual? Is there reciprocity? Or is it one-sided? If it's one-sided, you have a choice. You can continue as is, knowing you're pouring into someone who won't pour back. Or you can adjust. Set boundaries. Pull back your investment to match theirs. Stop giving more than they're willing to give. And see what happens. Often, what happens is one of 2 things. Either they step up, start reciprocating, start valuing what you give because it's no longer guaranteed, or they leave. They get angry, distant, cold. They stop reaching out because you're no longer useful. And if they leave, good. That's not loss. That's clarity. You've just identified someone who was using you. And removing them from your life frees up space for people who will actually value you, who will reciprocate, who will give as much as they take. Those people exist, but you'll never find them if your energy is consumed by people who only take. Some people will never appreciate your sacrifice, and that's not a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of their capacity. Some people are takers. It's who they are. They lack the empathy to consider your needs. They lack the awareness to recognize your effort. They lack the character to reciprocate. And you can't fix that. You can't love them into gratitude. You can't sacrifice enough to earn their appreciation. Because appreciation isn't about what you give. It's about who they are. And who they are is someone who takes. So stop giving to them. Stop sacrificing for people who will never see it. Stop exhausting yourself for people who don't value you. Your energy is finite. Your time is limited. Your life is precious. And wasting it on unappreciative people is not noble. It's tragic. You deserve relationships where your effort is seen, where your giving is reciprocated, where your presence is valued, not just your provision. And those relationships exist, but you have to make space for them. And making space requires letting go of the relationships that drain you, the people who take and never give, the people who expect and never appreciate, the people who use and never value. Let them go. Not with bitterness, not with anger, just with clarity. They're not your people. And continuing to give to them is continuing to betray yourself. Choose yourself. Choose reciprocity. Choose relationships that honor your worth instead of exploiting your kindness. That's not selfish. That's self-respect. And self-respect is where freedom begins. Let's continue. Chapter 6. Learning to say no without guilt. The word no is a complete sentence. It doesn't require justification. It doesn't require explanation. It doesn't require apology. No is enough. But for most people, especially chronic carriers, no feels impossible. It feels rude, mean, selfish, like a betrayal of who they're supposed to be. So they say yes, even when they mean no, even when yes costs them their peace, even when yes depletes them completely. They say yes to avoid disappointing others, yes to avoid conflict, yes to avoid guilt. And every yes that should have been a no is a small betrayal of themselves, a small sacrifice of their needs for someone else's comfort. And those small betrayals accumulate until there's nothing left, until they're empty, burnt out, resentful, and wondering why everyone takes advantage of them. The answer is simple: because they let them. Learning to say no is one of the most important skills you'll ever develop. It's not about being difficult or unkind. It's about honoring your capacity. It's about respecting your limits. It's about acknowledging that your time and energy are finite resources, and you get to decide how they're spent. Not everyone else. You. And if you don't start saying no to what doesn't serve you, you'll never have space for what does. Your life will be filled with obligations you resent, people you don't want to help, commitments you didn't want to make, and you'll feel like a victim. But you're not a victim. You're someone who hasn't learned to say no, and that's a skill you can learn. Here's the first truth about saying no. It's uncomfortable, especially at first. Especially if you've spent your whole life saying yes. People won't like it. They'll be surprised, disappointed, maybe even angry. They're used to you saying yes. They're used to you being available. They're used to you sacrificing yourself for their convenience. And when that changes, they'll resist. They'll push back. They'll try to guilt you. They'll say things like, "I thought I could count on you. You've changed. I guess I know where I stand now." And you'll feel terrible. You'll feel guilty. You'll want to take it back, to say yes, to go back to being the person who never disappoints. But don't. Because their discomfort is not your responsibility. Their disappointment is not your problem. Your no is valid, and you don't owe anyone an explanation. Let me tell you about a man named Raphael. Raphael was the go-to person in his family. Need help moving? Call Raphael. Need money? Call Raphael. Need someone to watch the kids? Call Raphael. And Raphael always said yes, even when he was exhausted, even when he had his own responsibilities, even when it inconvenienced him significantly. He said yes because that's what family does. That's what good people do. And Raphael was terrified of being seen as selfish. So he sacrificed constantly, and he was miserable. One day, Raphael's cousin called, last minute, asked him to drive 3 hours to help with something that could have been handled a dozen other ways. And for the first time in his life, Raphael said no. He said, "I can't. I have plans." His cousin was shocked. Plans? What plans could be more important than family? And Raphael, feeling the familiar guilt rising, almost caved, almost said he'd come. But instead, he said, I have plans with myself. I need rest. I'm sorry, but I can't help this time. The silence was heavy. His cousin was clearly upset, and Raphael felt awful. But he held his no, and when he hung up, he felt something unexpected. Relief. He'd chosen himself, for once, and it felt good. Scary, but good. The guilt lingered for days. Raphael kept thinking maybe he should have helped. Maybe he was being selfish. But he also noticed something. He had energy. He wasn't depleted. He actually enjoyed his weekend because he wasn't spending it doing something he resented. And over time, the guilt faded. And Raphael realized that saying no didn't make him a bad person. It made him a person with boundaries. And boundaries, he was learning, were essential. Here's how to start saying no. Practice in low-stakes situations. When someone asks if you want to do something you don't want to do, say no. Do you want to grab coffee? No, thank you. Can you help with this project? No, I'm not available. Don't explain. Don't justify. Just no. The urge to explain will be strong. You'll want to list all the reasons why you can't, but explanations give people room to negotiate, to problem solve, to convince you. No is final. Explanations are invitations to debate, so practice saying no without the follow-up. Just the word, clean, clear, complete. The second truth about saying no, you'll lose some people. Not everyone will respect your boundaries. Some people only valued you for what you gave them. And when you stop giving, they'll leave. And that will hurt. But it's also information. It tells you who was really in your life for you versus who was there for what you provided. And losing people who only valued your service is not loss. It's liberation. It's making space for people who value you as a person, not a resource. So when people leave because you set boundaries, let them. Don't chase them. Don't apologize. Don't try to convince them you're still a good person. Just let them go. They were never yours to begin with. The third truth, saying no gets easier. The first no is the hardest. The guilt is intense. The fear is real. But every no you hold makes the next one easier. Because you prove to yourself that you survive it. That saying no doesn't destroy relationships that matter. That people who truly care about you will respect your limits. And over time, no stops feeling like a rejection. It starts feeling like self-care, like boundary setting, like honoring yourself. And that shift is everything. Here's a script for when people push back. I understand you're disappointed, but I've made my decision, and it's not going to change. That's it. You acknowledge their feeling without taking responsibility for it. You hold your boundary without being mean, and you end the conversation. Don't engage in further discussion. Don't defend your reasons. Don't let them guilt you. Just repeat, I understand, but my answer is no. And if they keep pushing, end the interaction. Walk away. Hang up. Leave. Because people who don't respect your no don't respect you, and you don't owe them your time or energy. Another powerful phrase, that doesn't work for me. You don't have to say why. You don't have to justify. That doesn't work for me is a complete explanation. It's not negotiable. It's not debatable. It's just a statement of fact. And it puts the responsibility where it belongs. On you to know your limits, and on them to respect those limits. If they press for reasons, you can simply repeat, it just doesn't work for me, and leave it there. Your boundaries don't require their understanding. They just require your commitment. Learning to say no without guilt is learning to prioritize yourself. It's recognizing that you matter, that your needs are valid, that your time is valuable, that your energy is finite, and that protecting those things is not selfish. It's necessary. Because if you don't protect your peace, no one else will. If you don't honor your limits, no one else will. If you don't choose yourself, no one else will. So start saying no to requests that drain you, to people who take advantage, to obligations that don't serve you, to anything that costs you more than it gives you. Say no and mean it, and watch how your life transforms when you finally stop carrying what isn't yours to hold. Let's move forward. Chapter 7. What happens when you finally stop carrying? There's a moment that comes when you finally put it all down, all the burdens that weren't yours, all the emotions you've been managing, all the problems you've been solving, all the weight you've been carrying for people who never asked you to carry it. You put it down, and for a moment, you feel light, free, like you can finally breathe. But then, almost immediately, the panic sets in, the guilt, the fear, because you've been carrying for so long that you don't know who you are without it. Your identity has been built around being the helper, the fixer, the reliable one. And now that you've stopped, there's a void, an uncomfortable emptiness where the weight used to be. And you don't know how to sit in that emptiness without filling it again. This is the withdrawal phase, and it's brutal. Because when you stop carrying, you have to face what you've been avoiding by staying busy with everyone else's problems, yourself, your own pain, your own needs, your own unprocessed emotions, all the things you've been running from by focusing on fixing everyone else. And now, there's nowhere to run. You have to sit with it, feel it, process it, and that's terrifying. So many people, right at this point, pick the weight back up. They go back to carrying because the discomfort of facing themselves is worse than the exhaustion of carrying others. But if you can push through this phase, if you can sit with the discomfort without running back to old patterns, something miraculous happens. You start to find yourself again. Let me tell you what happens when you stop carrying. First, people notice, and they don't like it. The people who've been depending on you to manage their emotions, solve their problems, sacrifice yourself for their comfort, they'll push back. They'll test your boundaries. They'll guilt you. They'll accuse you of changing, of being selfish, of abandoning them. And they're right about one thing. You have changed. You've stopped betraying yourself. You've stopped prioritizing everyone else's needs above your own. And to them, that feels like betrayal. Because they've gotten used to a version of you that doesn't exist anymore. A version that gave endlessly, that absorbed everything, that never said no. And they want that version back. But that version was destroying you. So when they push, you hold firm. You remind yourself that their discomfort is not your responsibility, that you're not abandoning them by choosing yourself, that real relationships survive boundaries, and relationships that weren't real to begin with. Second, you'll feel guilt. Intense, suffocating guilt. You'll question whether you're doing the right thing, whether you're being too harsh, whether you should just go back to helping. And this guilt will try to pull you back into old patterns. But remember, guilt is just conditioning. It's the voice of everyone who taught you that your worth depends on sacrifice. That being a good person means giving until there's nothing left. But that voice is not truth. It's programming, and you don't have to obey it. You can feel the guilt and choose yourself anyway. You can acknowledge the discomfort and still hold your boundaries. Because guilt, like all emotions, is temporary. It will pass. But the freedom you're building by not carrying is permanent. Third, you'll have time. Actual time. Time you used to spend managing other people's problems. Time you used to spend worrying about other people's feelings. Time you used to spend carrying weight that wasn't yours. And at first, you won't know what to do with it. You've been so busy with everyone else that you've forgotten what you actually enjoy, what brings you joy, what lights you up. So you'll need to rediscover yourself. Try things, explore, rest, do nothing, and be okay with it. This is the reclamation phase, where you take back the life you lost to carrying, where you remember who you are beneath the role of caretaker. And it's beautiful. Scary, but beautiful. Fourth, you'll notice your energy returning. Slowly at first. You'll wake up and realize you're not exhausted before the day even begins. You'll make it through a day without feeling drained. You'll have emotional capacity for your own life, and it will feel strange, foreign, because you've been running on empty for so long that empty felt normal. But this isn't empty. This is full. This is what it feels like to not be depleted by everyone else's needs. This is what it feels like to have energy for yourself. And once you feel it, you'll never want to go back. Because this is what peace feels like. This is what freedom feels like. And it's worth every uncomfortable moment it took to get here. Let me tell you about a woman named Esperanza. Esperanza spent 20 years carrying her family, her parents' expectations, her siblings' problems, her children's every need. She was the emotional center of the family, the one everyone called, the one who fixed everything. And she was exhausted, burnt out, resentful. But she didn't know how to stop, until her body stopped for her. She had a breakdown, complete physical and emotional collapse. And in that forced rest, she realized she couldn't continue. Something had to change. So when she recovered, she made a decision. She would stop carrying. She told her family she loved them, but she couldn't be their emotional dumping ground anymore. She couldn't solve their problems. She couldn't manage their feelings. They would have to figure it out themselves. Her family was shocked, upset. Her mother said she was being selfish. Her siblings said she was abandoning them. And Esperanza felt horrible, like she was failing everyone. But she held her boundary, and something amazing happened. Her family, forced to manage their own emotions, started growing. They started solving their own problems. They started developing resilience. Things Esperanza had been preventing by always swooping in to fix. And within a year, her relationships with her family were healthier than they'd ever been. Not because she carried them, but because she stopped. Because she let them be responsible for themselves. And she reclaimed her life. She started painting again, something she loved but abandoned years ago. She started traveling. She made new friends. She lived. And she realized that all those years of carrying, she'd thought she was helping. But she was just enabling. And enabling isn't love. It's codependence. When you stop carrying, the people who truly love you will adjust. They'll respect your boundaries. They'll still love you, even though you're not their emotional crutch anymore. And the people who don't, they'll leave. And that's okay, because those people didn't love you. They loved what you did for them. And relationships based on utility are not relationships worth keeping. You'll also discover that you're capable of being loved for who you are, not what you give. That people can value your presence without needing your service. That you can have relationships where you're not the only one giving, where reciprocity is natural, where support flows both ways. These relationships feel different, lighter, freer, because you're not carrying them. You're walking beside them, equal, mutual, healthy. What happens when you stop carrying is this. You get your life back. You get your energy back. You get yourself back. And yes, it's uncomfortable at first. Yes, people will push back. Yes, you'll feel guilty. But on the other side of all that discomfort is freedom. The freedom to live according to your needs, not everyone else's. The freedom to give because you want to, not because you have to. The freedom to say no without drowning in guilt. The freedom to be yourself, fully, without the weight of everyone else's expectations crushing you. That freedom is worth fighting for, worth holding boundaries for, worth choosing yourself for. So put it down, all of it, and see what happens when you finally stop carrying what was never yours to hold. Let's continue. Chapter 8. Rebuilding your life around your needs. For years, maybe decades, your life has been built around other people's needs. Your schedule determined by their demands. Your energy allocated to their problems. Your decisions filtered through their expectations. You've been living someone else's life, or multiple someone else's lives. Everyone's life except your own. And now that you've stopped carrying, now that you've put down what wasn't yours, there's space, empty space, and you need to fill it. Not with more obligations, not with more people to save, but with yourself, your needs, your desires, your life. This is the rebuilding phase, and it's where you reclaim everything you lost to carrying. The first step is asking yourself a question you probably haven't asked in years. What do I actually want? Not what should I want? Not what people expect me to want? But what do I, in my deepest truth, actually want? For many people, this question is surprisingly hard to answer because they've spent so long prioritizing everyone else that they've lost touch with their own desires. They don't know what they enjoy, what lights them up, what brings them joy. They know what everyone else needs, but they have no idea what they need. So if that's you, start small. What do you want for dinner? What do you want to do this weekend? What sounds enjoyable? And listen to the answer. Really listen. Not the answer you think you should give. The answer that's true. And honor it. The second step is creating structure around your needs. If rest is a need, schedule it. Put it in your calendar like you would any other appointment. If creative expression is a need, make time for it. If solitude is a need, protect it. Treat your needs as non-negotiable, not as things you'll get to if there's time left over, but as priorities, because if you don't prioritize your needs, no one else will. And you'll slip back into the pattern of giving everything away until there's nothing left. So structure your life intentionally. Make sure that your needs are met first. Then if there's capacity, you can give to others. But your cup has to be full first. That's not selfish. That's sustainable. Let me tell you about a man named Diego. Diego spent his life building a career he didn't love because his father expected it. He married someone his family approved of, even though they weren't compatible. He lived in a city he hated because that's where the job was. Every major decision in Diego's life had been made based on what others wanted for him, and he was miserable. Successful by external measures, but empty inside. At 45, Diego had a realization. He'd never lived his own life. He'd been living everyone else's version of what his life should be. And if he didn't change, he'd die having never known himself. So, Diego started small. He asked himself what he actually wanted. And the answer surprised him. He wanted to teach. He wanted to work with young people. He wanted to live somewhere quiet. He wanted to end his marriage, which had been lifeless for years. These were terrifying revelations, because acting on them meant disappointing everyone. His father, his wife, his colleagues, everyone who had expectations of him. But Diego realized that disappointing them was less painful than continuing to abandon himself. So he made changes. Slowly. He transitioned careers. He filed for divorce. He moved to a small town. And everyone thought he'd lost his mind. His father stopped speaking to him. His friends said he was going through a crisis. But Diego felt more alive than he had in decades, because he was finally living his life. Not theirs. His. Rebuilding your life around your needs also means letting go of who you thought you were supposed to be. The identity you've been carrying, the one built on sacrifice and service and endless giving, that's not who you are. That's who you became to survive, to be loved, to be valued. But it's not your true self. Your true self has needs, has desires, has boundaries, has limits. And honoring that self means letting go of the performance. The version of you that never says no, that never gets tired, that never puts yourself first. That version was a facade. And it's time to let it crumble. Beneath it is someone real. Someone who's allowed to be human. Someone who's allowed to have needs. And that someone deserves to live. Here's a practice. Every week, do something just for you. Something that brings you joy. Something that has no purpose other than your enjoyment. It could be reading, walking, creating, resting, anything. But it has to be for you. Not productive, not obligatory, just joyful. At first, this will feel selfish, indulgent, wasteful. But push through that feeling. Because joy is not selfish. It's essential. And if your life has no joy, if it's all obligation and sacrifice, it's not a life. It's an endurance test. And you deserve more than endurance. You deserve enjoyment, pleasure, fulfillment, things you've been denying yourself while giving everything to everyone else. Rebuilding also means surrounding yourself with different people. People who respect boundaries, who don't expect you to sacrifice yourself, who value you for who you are, not what you give. These people might be different from your current circle. That's okay. You're different now. You've changed. And your relationships need to reflect that change. So seek out people who are on the same journey, who understand boundaries, who prioritize their own well-being, who can give and receive in balanced ways. These are your people, not the ones who only take, not the ones who guilt you for saying no, the ones who respect you, and build community there. Here's the truth. Rebuilding your life around your needs is not a one-time event. It's a daily practice. Every day, you'll face choices. Choices between your needs and others' demands. Between your peace and someone's expectation. Between your truth and their comfort. And every time, you'll need to choose yourself. Not in a selfish way, but in a self-honoring way. You'll need to ask, does this serve me? Does this align with my values? Does this honor my needs? And if the answer is no, you decline. You set a boundary. You choose differently. And over time, those choices build a life that's truly yours. A life where your needs matter, where your energy is protected, where your peace is prioritized. That's the life you're building. One choice at a time, one boundary at a time, one reclaimed moment at a time. And it's worth it. Every uncomfortable conversation, every guilty feeling, every person who leaves because you stopped carrying them, it's all worth it. Because on the other side is freedom. Let's continue. Chapter 9. The gift of letting others struggle. There's a gift you can give that most people never consider. The gift of letting others struggle. It sounds cruel. It sounds uncaring. But it's actually the most loving thing you can do. Because struggle is how people grow. Difficulty is how people develop strength. Problems are how people learn problem solving. And when you constantly rescue, when you always intervene, when you perpetually carry, you rob people of these experiences. You prevent their growth. You stunt their development. You keep them dependent. Not because you're malicious, but because you think you're helping. You think rescuing them is love, but it's not. It's enabling. And enabling, no matter how well-intentioned, is harmful. Think about a child learning to walk. They fall, over and over, and every time they struggle to get back up. Now imagine if every time they fell, you picked them up immediately. Never let them struggle. Never let them figure out how to stand on their own. What would happen? They'd never learn to walk. They'd remain dependent on you to do it for them. That's obvious with children. But the same principle applies to adults. When you constantly rescue adults from the consequences of their choices, when you always solve their problems, when you never let them struggle, you keep them in a state of perpetual childhood. They don't develop resilience. They don't learn accountability. They don't grow. Because you're doing the work for them. And work that's done for you doesn't teach you anything except that someone will always be there to do it. Let me tell you about a woman named Bianca. Bianca had a son, Marco, who was 28 and still living at home. Marco had a job, but he was constantly broke. He'd spend money irresponsibly and then need Bianca to cover his rent, his car payment, his bills. And Bianca always did. She told herself she was helping him, that she was being a good mother, that she couldn't let him struggle. But Marco never changed, because he didn't have to. Bianca would always bail him out, so he kept making the same choices, kept living beyond his means, kept depending on his mother to fix it. And Bianca, exhausted and resentful, kept rescuing. Until one day, her therapist asked her, "What is Marco learning from this arrangement?" Bianca paused. She wanted to say he was learning that she loved him, but that wasn't what he was learning. He was learning that he didn't have to be responsible, that there would always be a safety net, that his choices didn't have real consequences because mom would always soften them. He wasn't learning financial responsibility. He wasn't learning independence. He wasn't learning problem solving. He was learning dependence. And Bianca realized that by constantly rescuing him, she was preventing him from becoming a functioning adult. She was keeping him a child, not because she wanted to, but because she couldn't stand to see him struggle. So Bianca made a decision. The next time Marco asked for money, she said no. She told him she loved him, but she couldn't keep rescuing him, that he needed to figure it out himself. Marco was furious. He couldn't believe she was abandoning him. He said horrible things, and Bianca felt terrible. Every instinct screamed at her to give in, but she didn't. She held her boundary. And Marco, for the first time in his life, had to face the consequences of his choices. His car got repossessed. He had to move into a cheaper place. He had to budget. And it was hard, really hard. but he did it. And slowly, he started making better choices. Because now those choices mattered. Now they had real consequences. And Bianca, watching from a distance, realized she'd done him a favor. By letting him struggle, she'd given him the opportunity to grow. Something all her rescuing had prevented. The gift of letting others struggle doesn't mean you stop caring. It doesn't mean you abandon people. It means you trust them. Trust that they're capable of handling their own problems. Trust that they can learn from their mistakes. Trust that struggle, while uncomfortable, is necessary for growth. And when you trust people with their own struggles, you give them dignity. You treat them as capable adults, not helpless children. You honor their agency instead of undermining it. That's respect. That's real love. Here's how to practice this. When someone comes to you with a problem, resist the urge to fix it. Instead, ask questions. What have you tried? What do you think you should do? What resources do you have? Guide them to their own solutions instead of providing yours. And if they say they don't know, resist the urge to tell them. Say, I trust you'll figure it out. And then step back. Let them sit with the problem. Let them struggle. Let them find their own way. And only offer help if they've exhausted their own efforts and specifically ask for support. And even then, offer support, not solutions. Be a sounding board, not a rescuer. This is hard, especially if you're a natural helper. Every instinct will tell you to jump in, to fix, to solve, to carry. But resist, because helping someone means empowering them, not enabling them. It means believing they're capable, not treating them as fragile. It means supporting their growth, not stunting it. And sometimes, growth requires pain, requires failure, requires struggle. And letting people have those experiences, as uncomfortable as it is to watch, is one of the most loving things you can do. The gift of letting others struggle also frees you. Because when you're not responsible for fixing everyone, you're not carrying their problems. You're not stressed about their outcomes. You're not losing sleep over their choices. You can care without carrying. You can love without losing yourself. You can support without sacrificing. And that's sustainable. That's healthy. That's a way of relating that doesn't destroy you. So let people struggle. Let them fall. Let them figure it out. Trust that they're more capable than you think. And trust that your job is not to prevent their pain, but to believe in their strength. That's the gift. And it will change everything. Let's move forward. Chapter 10. Living Light. There's a version of you that exists on the other side of all this letting go. A version that moves through life unburdened. That doesn't absorb every emotion in the room. That doesn't feel responsible for everyone's happiness. That doesn't carry problems that aren't theirs to solve. This version is light. Not because they don't care, but because they've learned the difference between caring and carrying. This version has boundaries that protect their peace, has clarity about what's theirs and what's not, has the strength to say no without guilt and the wisdom to prioritize their own well-being. This version is free. And this version is possible for you. Not someday. Not when everything is perfect. Now, if you choose it. Living light means waking up without the weight of everyone else's expectations on your chest. It means going through your day responding to your own needs before anyone else's. It means having energy at the end of the day because you didn't give it all away. It means sleeping peacefully because you're not worrying about problems that aren't yours. It means feeling joy without guilt. Feeling rest without anxiety. feeling full without depletion. That's what living light feels like. And once you experience it, you'll never want to go back to carrying, because carrying is heavy. And light is where life actually happens. Living light also means accepting that not everyone will like this version of you, the version with boundaries, the version who says no, the version who prioritizes themselves. People who benefited from your carrying will be upset. They'll call you selfish. They'll say you've changed. They'll be disappointed. And they're right. You have changed. You've stopped betraying yourself. You've stopped sacrificing your well-being for their comfort. And that change is not a regression. It's evolution. It's growth. It's becoming who you were always meant to be before the world taught you to carry. Let me tell you about a moment I had. I'd spent years carrying. Friends, family, colleagues, anyone who needed anything. And I was exhausted, burnt out, resentful. I didn't recognize myself anymore. So I started putting things down, setting boundaries, saying no. And it was hard. People pushed back. Some left. And I felt guilty, like I was failing everyone. But I kept going, kept choosing myself, kept prioritizing my peace. And one day, I woke up and realized something. I felt light. For the first time in years, I felt light. The weight was gone. Not because everyone's problems disappeared, but because I stopped making them mine. I stopped carrying what wasn't mine to hold. And that lightness changed everything. I had energy for my own life, my own dreams, my own joy. I could breathe again. I could laugh again. I could just be. And it was beautiful. Living light is not about becoming selfish or uncaring. It's about recognizing that you're a person too, with needs, with limits, with a life that deserves to be lived. And that living that life fully requires you to stop giving it away to everyone else. It requires boundaries. It requires saying no. It requires prioritizing yourself without guilt. And yes, that's uncomfortable. Yes, people will judge. Yes, relationships will change. But the alternative is continuing to carry until you break. And you've carried long enough. You've sacrificed enough. You've given enough. It's time to choose yourself. It's time to live light. Here's what living light looks like practically. You wake up in the morning, and before checking your phone, before seeing what everyone needs from you, you check in with yourself. How do I feel? What do I need today? And you honor that. You go through your day, making choices based on your capacity, not others' expectations. Someone asks for help, and before automatically saying yes, you pause. You ask yourself, do I have the energy for this? Does this align with my priorities? Can I do this without resenting it? And if the answer is no, you decline, without guilt, without over-explaining. Just a simple, I'm not available for that right now. You protect your peace like it's sacred, because it is. Living light also means celebrating the small victories. Every time you say no without apologizing. Every time you set a boundary that holds. Every time you prioritize yourself without guilt. These are victories. Acknowledge them. Celebrate them. Because you're rewriting patterns that have been in place for years, maybe decades. And every moment you choose differently is progress. Every boundary you hold is growth. Every time you choose yourself is healing. Don't dismiss these moments as small. They're everything. They're how transformation happens. One conscious choice at a time. Living light means understanding that your worth is not determined by how much you give. You are valuable simply because you exist, not because of what you do for others, not because of how much you sacrifice, not because of how many people depend on you, just because you are. And when you truly believe that, when you internalize that truth, everything changes. You stop performing worth. You stop earning love through depletion. You stop proving yourself through sacrifice. You just are. And that's enough. That's always been enough. So here's the invitation. Put it down. All of it. Everything you've been carrying that isn't yours. The emotions, the problems, the expectations, the guilt, the responsibility for everyone else's happiness. Put it down. Not because you don't care, but because carrying it is destroying you. And you matter. Your life matters. Your peace matters. Your energy matters. You matter just as much as everyone you've been carrying. And it's time to live like you believe that. Living light is your birthright. It's how life is meant to be lived. Engaged, but not enmeshed. Caring, but not carrying. Connected, but not consumed. And it's available to you right now. Not when you've helped everyone. Not when everyone is okay. Now. If you choose it. So choose it. Choose yourself. Choose boundaries. Choose peace. Choose light. Because on the other side of all that weight, all that carrying, all that sacrifice, is a version of you that's been waiting. A version that's light, free, alive. And that version is calling you home. Answer it. Put down what isn't yours and step into the life that is. Welcome to living light. Welcome home.